Well, my memories and experience with 9/11, I've got two stories I will tell. Needless to say, 9/11 was one of the more significant events in uh, our lives. I think the only other incident in my life that I can remember more vividly was the death of John Kennedy and all the turmoil that was around that. And this was, in a sense, of all the days I've, 9/11 was most like the day I experienced with the death of with John Kennedy. Um, and two things occurred on that day because, as I remember the day, it was a really very nice fall day, and I had a 10 o'clock appointment out by Tyson's Corner. I was working for Freddie Mac at the time, um, and scheduled a meeting with at 10 o'clock with a delegation of very high-ranking Russian officials um, who wanted to discuss how they could build housing for all their soldiers that were going to be returning from the dissolution of the Soviet Union. And so we had this 10 o'clock meeting, and I was, you know, and I was living in Alexandria, and I had to come by the Pentagon to get out to my office, and I literally went by the Pentagon like 10 minutes before the plane crashed into it, and I got out there, and I think that someone notified and then I was notified that the meeting had been delayed because the Russian delegation could not get out to Tyson's Corner because of the delays, all the traffic delays and so forth. So I think that was kind of the first I knew anything about it because although the New York episode had occurred earlier, I was getting ready to go to work and hadn't turned on the TV and so forth. Well, that was fine. So then, like everyone else, I watched the plane crash into the towers. And I used to live in New York. I happened to know the area. I thought the two towers actually were very ugly. I thought architecturally they were a disaster. So I was never a great fan of the towers, um, but I knew I knew the area very well. Uh, and then later, my son, one of my sons, who was living in New York, called me because he was very concerned because he and his wife lived in New York, and her office was next to the World Trade Center. She was in the office, in one of the buildings. She worked for one of the financial things, and she was scheduled to be in the world in the towers, and he was concerned because he hadn't been able to get a hold of her. Well, it turned out that she watched the towers come down from her building, and she had been delayed going to the meeting um, by some telephone call and so forth. But so she missed being in the towers by 10 minutes. Uh, and uh, needless to say, then she tells the story of watching it and so forth, and kind of going through the turmoil of all of the disaster down at the Trade Center itself, right next to it, and then having to walk. They were living on 110th Street in Manhattan, so she walked from Lower Manhattan all the way up to just below up to 110th Street in her high heels, and needless to say, she was kind of a wreck when she got there. Well, for months after that, she just felt bad. She thought that there was some type of residual effect from it because she stuck in her stomach, headaches, and so forth. Well, it turned out we found out 3 or 4 months later that a great deal of the symptoms that she was exhibiting throughout that period, which she thought was a result of the World Trade Center experience, she was pregnant. She'd become pregnant either just before or just after that. And our granddaughter was born about 9 months after that. So those are the two experiences I had with uh, with with 9/11. So it becomes kind of a very memorial type of set of experiences in my life. I went to the memorial very soon after it was completed. I have friends in New York, and I think my son was still living there. We went up to visit him, so I went down there, and I did take all the walk, in which you have to it's quite a walk all the way down to the bottom where the wreckage is, um, and it was a very sobering type type of experience, um, and I thought that it's kind of almost kind of little reflecting pools I remember at the top, and um, that it was very impressive. Um, the only other type of memorial I've seen that's kind of equal to it is the Holocaust Memorial in Berlin, which has got again a similar type of dramatic, all of these stones and so forth. But it was quite impressive. It was just very sobering that you can come within that. Life is kind of a chance. I mean, the thing is what would have happened if you'd been just a little slightly different, for the because these big events can, and the big events then also can have interesting implications. I mean, the JFK of my story there is I was in the midst of taking my PhD comprehensive exams, and I walked into the office at the University of Chicago, all prepared at 1 o'clock, having studied for one whole year for taking these exams. And an hour before the exam was the announcement of Kennedy's death. And the entire campus literally closed down. And so our comprehensive exams were delayed, I think, three weeks before and so that was kind of a shock. Um, and this was equally a shock, especially when we found out that my daughter-in-law had come so close to being one of the victims. We have, as Americans, kind of came together, and a great deal of the petty politics, um, and it kind of went away in some ways. And there was a pulling together. Um, some of the later results I'm not quite so sure of, but at that time, I think we all felt like Americans at that point. Uh, and that was very nice. Um, some of the policies and reactions coming out of it, I have more reservations about. Uh, Certainly, our wholesale involvement in uh, trying to build or change the scope and the nature of the Middle East uh, probably got a big boost out of that, and and subsequently it's turned out to be somewhat of a misadventure. Uh, and those of us who knew anything about the Middle East um, knew that some of this stuff was not going to end well. So in that sense, uh, there was some interest, and that's an interesting set of consequences. So on the one hand, I think it was the experience of feeling like an American and all of us pulling together was a great, but then we kind of broke down to our little bastions which was unfortunate. It was unfortunate some of this unity just has not persisted. That's kind of the tragedy of all. It was a tragedy at the time. We didn't know quite how to react to it. I think some of the reactions were it was a misfortune, and it's interesting that experiences like that have historical consequences. Um, and the past is a reflection of what's the future. And if you don't deal with the past in an appropriate way, then the future can become distorted. So a great deal of our involvement, for example, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and so forth, in the Middle East generally, um, has been colored by this tragedy and of 9/11. Um, and that's just it's really unfortunate. And in a sense, I happen to know a number of I knew a number of Muslims. I've been involved with a number of people from the Middle East. Um, and so it's unfortunately the anti-Muslim reaction has been always been very unfortunate.
Okay.
I will get my pitch in, and then, the Middle East is a tragedy in and of itself, and it's interesting that Christianity, Muslims, and the Jews are all, as we speak of, they are peoples of the same book. They all recognize the same, in a sense, saints, wise men, and so forth. And it is a complete tragedy that these three religious groups, uh, cannot, for some reason, live together in some peaceful way. Uh, it's just unfortunate, and so that whole area is just a big tragedy, uh, which I do not completely understand why such conflicts continue to exist.